everyone. My name is Michelle Howard, the Director of Operations for We Are All Human. I'm excited to be the one that gets to tell you about the research that we've been working on in partnership with the Hispanic Star Alliance, some key international and national data and research partners, and our team at We Are All Human, who's been working very hard to gather what the Hispanic community looks like when mapped within the Sustainable Development Goals. As you heard from the incredible experts that have spoken before me, countries have taken these 17 goals, their many targets and indicators, and seen where they measure so that they can track progress towards advancing the future of the people and their planet. As the Hispanic community represents economically the equivalent of the 8th largest country in the world, we decided to take on the challenge of trying to do the same and map the Hispanic community within these goals, within the targets and the indicators, to see where there are gaps, opportunities, red flags, and more. First, to get started, a little bit of background on the methodology we used to put this mapping together. As a first step, we reviewed all of the 17 goals, all of the targets, and all of the indicators to identify the ones that were actually relevant for the Hispanic community. For example, Goal 14 is life underwater, and the Hispanic community aren't fish, so it didn't really seem applicable to dive into that area too much. However, after going through all of them and identifying the ones we should look for, we then went through and all the data and research that we could find with the many partners I previously mentioned to see how on a global, national, within the US, and then within the Hispanic community, we measure up against these goals, targets, and indicators. To build the narrative, we first looked for the data at the global level, then for the data within the United States, and then for the data specific to the Hispanic community to see how they compare to one another. By looking at the comparisons between the global and national data, we were able to understand trends and gain insights for where the Hispanic community truly mapped. We were able to take this data and put it into a map where we broke the indicators for the Hispanic community into 5 different groups. The first group was where the Hispanic community was performing below the national average. The second group is where it was performing above the national average. The third group is where they're trending up, however, they still fall below the national average. The fourth group is where we hadn't been able to find any data, and the fifth group is where it was not applicable. Finally, by reviewing this map, we were able to prioritize which SDGs were most relevant for the Hispanic community based on where we saw the most red. As we like to say, what gets measured gets done. Here is a picture of the mapping that I just referenced. Based on the 5 different groups, we have them color-coded to make it easier for you. So the group 1, where the Hispanic community performed below the national average, you can see those in red. Where they performed above, you can see those in green. The ones in yellow are where they are trending upwards, however, still fall below the national average. The white ones are where we're missing data and would love your help to find it, and the gray ones are the non-applicable indicators. Furthermore, we were able to look into this data and draw some key insights that we wanted to share. The first one being, the US generally is measuring above the global level in terms of these indicators. However, it's the minority communities within the US that are often left behind and unable to catch up. As we heard earlier, COVID has impacted every single one of the Sustainable Development Goals. Unfortunately, the developing countries and minorities within developed countries are those who are most disproportionately affected. Despite being left behind in the US Hispanics actually are faring better than Hispanics in Latin America generally. US Hispanics are above average in 9 of the indicators, however, they're below average in 36. These 36 indicators are targeted within 8 SDGs. I'm going to dive a little bit into each one of those to give you a better sense. First, for Goal 1, no poverty. 16% of US Hispanics live in poverty compared to 10% of non-Hispanic whites. The home ownership rate for Hispanics is 47% as compared to 70% for non-Hispanic whites. 28% of the poor population in the United States is Hispanic, despite representing 18% of the total population. For Goal 2, zero hunger, Hispanic children are twice as likely to lack access to nutritious food than non-Hispanic white children. Also, when compared to the national average, there's a 50% higher rate of food insecurity for the Hispanic community. For Goal 3, good health and well-being, 20% of Hispanics under 65 are without health insurance. Compared to non-Hispanic whites, Hispanics are 9 times more likely to get tuberculosis and have a 50% higher death rate from diabetes. Only 33% of Hispanics with mental health issues receive help. Vaccine administration for the Hispanic community dropped 50% for measles, mumps, rubella, diphtheria, and HPV. Goal 4, quality education. Only 34% of Hispanics from 3 to 5 years old enroll in preschool, which is 10 points below the national average. Hispanic enrollment in elementary schools is half that of white students. There is an 8-point gap in high school completion rate for Hispanics as compared to the national average. College completion rate for Hispanics is 49%, as compared to 70% for Asian and 67% for white. 25% of Latinas have a bachelor's degree, which is above Latinos, which is only 16%, as compared to 40% for white women. For Goal 5, gender equality, 1 in 3 Latinas suffer from physical violence or stalking. Latinas, on average, spend 7.2 hours in unpaid domestic care or household work. For every 100 men that are promoted into managerial positions, only 68 Latinas are. Within the Hispanic community, only 48% of domestic abuse cases go reported, as compared to 70% for non-Hispanic white. Latinas make only 53 cents to the dollar for every white man. Latinas represent only 3% of senior level positions. For Goal 8, decent work and economic growth, on the positive side, Hispanic GDP grew at a rate 4 times faster than the US overall. Additionally, Hispanics are incredibly entrepreneurial. As I know well from my friends Mark Madrid and Victor Arias, Hispanic business owners grew 34% over the last 10 years, as compared to just 1% for non-Hispanics. Fortunately, for some not so positive targets, Hispanic GDP per employed person is just $85,000 as compared to $128,000 as the national average. 1 in 4 of the so-called NEET, not employed or learning, are Hispanics. At its peak, unemployment for Hispanics was 17.6%, as compared to 12.4% for whites. Latinas' unemployment is the highest among all groups at 19%. While we can look at each of these goals one at a time, it's also too important to remember that all of them are interconnected. By impacting one, you impact many. For example, with these interconnections, there's some enablers of decent work. For example, less poverty and hunger leads to more access to education, and with more education, there's more access to higher wages. Furthermore, there's a domino effect we see here. With more education, there's a reduction in violence against women. At the same time, decent work also supports reduction in inequalities and peace and justice. At the same time, decent work also has an impact on reduced inequalities and peace and justice with the increase in representation over time. Additionally, access to clean energy helps households save money on utility bills. Finally, but equally as important, decent work has a transgenerational impact. By having access to a job, it makes them less poor and gives a better starting point for their children. Within decent work, we're also seeing some trends. The first trend is with young Hispanics. While their educational attainment is improving, it's important that we increase the percentage of Hispanics that achieve bachelor's degrees. And secondly, for young adults, there's a large number of Hispanics in low-wage jobs. It's important for us to improve their skills and move them into positions with proven opportunities. As you can see, all of our problems are interconnected. The more we understand our problems, the better our solutions will be. Now it's my pleasure to take us into another conversation where we'll dive deeper into some of these trends that we saw and really prioritize what the best actions will be to advance the community the fastest.